One of the dumb childhood beliefs that I used to have was that life used to legitimately be in black and white. I used to ask my parents and grandparents what life was like before color, and they would just laugh at me. All of their pictures were in black and white, so I mean, come on. Anyway, I found this video a few years ago of a guy talking about what it was like back in the day.
In our day, certain economic truths have become accepted as self-evident.
Oh, this should be good. Okay, so he's talking about things that have apparently become self-evident rather than what life without color is like, but it's something, right? What else does he have to say?
A second Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. I thought I finished my videos on the Bill of Rights. Do I have to make a part 3? Alright, so clearly not. What the heck is he talking about?
Among these are the right to a useful and remunerative job, the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, the right of every family to a decent home, the right to adequate medical care, and the opportunity to achieve and enjoy good health, the right to adequate protection from the economic fears of old age, sickness, accident, and unemployment, the right to a good education.
Alright, joke's over. I'm not a very good actor. This is FDR, and these are his proposed Second Economic Bill of Rights, recorded in 1944 after his State of the Union address.
All of these rights spell security. And after this war is won, we must be prepared to move forward in the implementation of these rights.
He died before the war ended. So what happened to these ideas? Well, to answer that, we need to back up a little bit in history. World War I. Most of the countries in the world were pretty free market capitalist and pretty isolationist, and didn't look at all like this. But the war made people realize that we couldn't just live by ourselves anymore. New ideas, along with some old ones, started bubbling up, especially after the Great Depression. Some people actually blamed capitalism for causing the Great Depression in the first place. A few countries took these ideas and ran with them, like Italy, Germany, and the Soviet Union. Let's make one thing clear. The economic fallout of World War I and the Great Depression were the direct cause of World War II. Racism and nationalism are more like sidekicks. Whenever the economy is bad, people always look for someone to blame, which usually leads to racism. During and after World War II, most countries started to adopt changes to their economies. Countries that were devastated by the war were rebuilt and restructured using FDR's Marshall Plan. This is the same plan that he was working on implementing here in America, and the same plan he was talking about in the Second Bill of Rights. Countries like France, Germany, and Japan were all rebuilt under this plan even after FDR died. America didn't have to rebuild though, and we were filled with such a sense of victory that it was fairly easy to convince the people that no further changes were needed, especially since communism, which was our ally during the war, was now our enemy. This was the Red Scare that happened immediately following World War II and continued through the 50s and 60s. Any economic change that resembled what our Western European allies looked like was branded as a move towards communism and letting the Soviets win.
And behind it will come other federal programs that will invade every area of freedom as we have known it in this country, until one day we will awake to find that we have socialism. One of these days, you and I are going to spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
In both the US and the Soviet Union, any economic change that resembled a move towards the other was demonized and propagandized. As a result, words like capitalism, communism, and socialism all became dirty words. Economists had to start using old terms like free market and command economy to even teach the differences. But now that the Red Scare is over and 2 generations have passed, those terms aren't as scary as they used to be, especially as a new generation of adults just went through the Great Recession and we're again looking for new ideas to prevent the next one. So now that we're caught up in history, let me start off by saying that this topic was on my list. But because of this question and this suggestion, I bumped it to this week. Let me start off with this question. Has true communism ever been tried before? No. Follow-up self-question, has true capitalism ever been tried before? Also no. But thousands of people play a small-scale simulation of capitalism every day. As long as you play by the actual rules, monopoly is true capitalism. I've personally never finished a game of Monopoly because we always ended up bending or adding in rules to keep the game going or to keep a player who was about to lose in the game. It always ended up going for days and days, but we'll get back to this example in a minute. First, let's discuss these two systems. They exist on a spectrum with capitalism on one end, communism on the other, and socialism in the middle. Alright, now stop.
Collaborate and listen.
If you're an economist, stop typing your angry comment. I'll get to what you're thinking in a minute. We're going to start out simple and we'll build on it. I need to be able to talk about these two dirty C words and this dirty S word without Dragonzord. Without you boiling over in anger. Also keep in mind that this is an educational video and I'm not pushing for any of the topics I discussed today. In fact, I personally disagree with many of them, but that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore them or not present them. So let's start with capitalism because I already have the game set up and I'm sure Wheatley can't wait to start knocking things over. Yes, this is the Star Wars version. Yes, I am actually playing, and no, they are not sponsoring this video, although if they'd like to. In true capitalism, or a true free market economy, the government is completely hands-off. Economists like to call this laissez-faire, which is just French for left to do. Part of me wonders if economists just use these terms on purpose to overcomplicate it and make it too hard for the layperson to understand. There are no government regulations on the market. Suppliers and consumers decide what goods and services will be available and how much they cost. Now you can spin this either way. One way is by saying that the government has no place in regulating businesses, or how much things cost or how much people earn, which sounds pretty intuitive and even fair. The other way is by saying that the government doesn't regulate what businesses do, or how much things cost, or how much or how little people are paid. It wasn't just the tone that changed there. Without government regulations and oversight, there'd be no environmental protections. Consumers would just tell companies whether or not they like them polluting rivers or clear-cutting forests by not supporting them and not buying their products. There'd be no minimum wage either. The market would decide the price of labor with no ceiling and no floor, so potentially all the way down to zero. Now, not that many people are willing to work for nothing, so it's always suggested that the market would correct for this, both because of a lack of willing workers and the unwillingness of consumers to buy from a company that uses slave labor. Prices would also be unregulated. They'd be set at whatever the supply and demand graph's efficiency point predicts. Don't worry, you do not have to know what that means, other than it's the price point where every single product made is sold, with no leftovers and no empty-handed consumers. This literally never happens. For common items, there's always more supply than there is demand. Think toilet paper. For luxury items, there's always more demand than there is supply, like iPhones on release day. In capitalism, the supplier will set the price, and they'll set it as high as people are willing to pay. So take a life-saving medication, for example. The supplier can set it as high as they want. When it comes to pay or die, people are usually willing to pay whatever it costs. Again, in true capitalism, the government doesn't get involved in the market at all. Roads are privately constructed and maintained, and services that you count on like police, fire, water, and sewage, all privatized. Schools and hospitals are also private companies. Can't afford that life-saving surgery? You die. Didn't pay your fire bill on time? You watch your house burn down. This is why true capitalism doesn't exist in the world today. If you run a true free market simulation with no government regulations and everyone starts out the same, eventually one person gets all the money. Now, this simulation isn't perfect. It's a fast-paced, closed system with a finite amount of wealth. So in the real world, where wealth can come in from the outside or be created by loans, there are millions of people and time is slow and endless, wealth still accumulates at the top. Not in the hands of one, but in the hands of the few. You also have to remember that in the real world, not everyone starts out with the same amount. If you're born rich, you already have a huge lead over someone who's joining the game poor. Because of the dog-eat-dog nature of a true capitalist system where people actually can go broke, some people think that it's in the best interest of the very wealthy to keep the poor people just poor enough that they don't represent any competition, but rich enough that they can continue buying their products and feel like they have too much to lose by revolting. Tell them that they're in the middle, too, not the bottom. Those homeless people, they're at the bottom.
The upper class keeps all of the money, pays none of the taxes. The middle class pays all of the taxes, does all of the work. The poor are there just to scare the shit out of the middle class.
So that was capitalism in a nutshell. Now let's talk about the other end of the spectrum, communism. In communism, the government does not regulate what businesses do, how much goods and services cost, or how much people are being paid. Hey, wait a second, didn't you just say that about capitalism? Yes, I did. In fact, you're going to find over the next minute or so that there's a lot of similarities between communism and capitalism that you probably didn't think of before. In both of these systems, the government is completely hands-off. The market decides the value of goods and services and the value of one's labor. Those of you with keen ears probably noticed the difference in that one. Nothing really costs anything in communism. The currency is usually dismissed entirely, as it's just a way for someone to accumulate more wealth than they actually need. In communism, everyone contributes to the system what they can, and they take from the system only what they need. This system, as well as capitalism, is based on the idea that everyone is a rational actor. In capitalism, people would only buy things at the efficiency cost, not a penny more or less. In communism, everyone contributes to the best of their ability, and they take only what they need, nothing more. Whether your contribution is sweeping the streets or being a dentist, as long as everyone is happy that you're contributing to the best of your ability, you're still part of the system. And now you've probably guessed why this system doesn't exist in the real world either. Human psychology just isn't wired to think this collectively. People are inherently selfish, envious, and jealous. Say you're a doctor who decides to treat this person before that person because this person contributes a little bit more. Or you're a tomato farmer who decides to give more tomatoes to that person because you're friends with them. If even one person decides to be selfish or jealous, then the entire system breaks down. Alright, since it's a new day and I'm still not done playing this game, let's go back to assuming that either are possible. In capitalism, everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed, but the harder you work, the more you'll earn. It rewards people's ingenuity and motivation. The more you work, the more you make. In communism, everyone is equal and nobody really strives to be more successful. It facilitates the prosperity of the community at the expense of individual motivation. So the more you need, the more you take. Except no, that sentence can be applied to either system in its entirety. For capitalism, the more you work, the more you make, money-wise, and the more you need subjectively, the more you take. Capitalists are greedy pigs. For communism, the more you work, the more you make for the community, and the more you need objectively, the more you take. Lazy communists lack motivation. And now to the point where I placate those economists who've been foaming at the mouth ever since I showed you this spectrum. Where does North Korea and the former Soviet Union fall on this spectrum? The answer is nowhere. It's time to show you that this spectrum is not a simple number line. I prefer showing it like a circle. Again, capitalism on the left, communism on the right, and socialism in purple. So what's this green piece at the top then? It's the dirty F word of economics, a word that's been so demonized by propaganda we don't even use it to describe our enemies anymore.
Fascism.
Across the center, you have government involvement in the economy. The further out from the center you get, the less government involvement there is until there's none, where there is no one. The further towards the center you get, the more government control there is. Also across the equator, the further to the right you get, the more collectivist your economy. The further to the left, the more individual. Up and down you have the distribution of power. At the top with fascism you have a dictatorship. Power lies with one person or one party. At the bottom with socialism, you have a democracy, government of the people. And in the middle, you have anarchy. Yeah! Unlike what death metal bands might think, anarchy does not mean chaos. It just means that there's no need for a government. Remember, at both ends of the spectrum, capitalism and communism, the government is hands-off. So let's work our way around this circle and figure out where some countries are. Let's start with this weird aqua color, a dictatorship with some capitalism. This is what most countries were before World War I. A monarchy, where the single ruler really only cared what happened inside their walls and outside was the Wild West. This really doesn't exist in the world anymore, so... Now back to the original question. Where does the Soviet Union and North Korea belong on this? Back when this was just a spectrum, you probably thought it was down here, but it's actually up here. The color they're sitting in is just a coincidence. And this is one of the main problems with the propaganda of the Red Scare. You know who else belongs up there? Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. There are three things complicating these terms: what a country calls itself, what they actually are, and what we call them. There's very little difference between Stalin and Hitler. They both called themselves socialists. One was the leader of the National Socialist Party, and the other was the leader of the United Soviet Socialist Republics. Neither of them were, though. They were both fascists. This was a war for democracy, though, so we couldn't really have a fascist dictator on our side. So instead we called him and his country communist. So once the war was over and fascism was defeated, Stalin and communism communism became the new enemy. In a fascist system, the government controls both the means of production and consumption. They say how much will be made and how much people will get, also known as rationing. They're usually guilty of some huge human rights violations and all manner of crimes to keep their people in line. Every country that we call a communist dictatorship is actually fascist, and there's no such thing as a socialist dictatorship. That's just another product of the propaganda machine. So what about those other terms that economists had to start using because of the Red Scare? Well, a free market exists down here. The closer you get to capitalism, the more free you are. And a command economy exists up here. The closer you get to the top, the more command and control there is. So let's be done with the evil of the world and get to countries that we actually like. Most countries of the world use some form of socialism. In socialism, the government controls the means of production for certain goods and services that it deems beneficial to the entire population, unlike fascism, which controls the means of production and consumption for everything. Down here in the purple, we have countries like France, Germany, the UK, Canada, Australia, and Sweden. I'm pretty sure that's most of my demographics. The closer towards the red end of the spectrum you get, you have countries like Japan. And lastly, let's get to the United States. Most Americans probably think that we're way up towards the blue end, but we're actually more like here. This might even be generous. We're probably more purple than you might think. So with the election coming up, a lot of ideas have been thrown around that would move America in one direction or the other. So let's talk about some of those ideas and what those purple countries have that we don't. You might actually find that America has more socialism than you previously thought. Let's get simple for a moment. All of these countries have police, fire, and military provided by the government, a way of protecting the people from outside and within and protecting their property. They also all have a national postal system and some sort of subsidized transportation network supervised by the government. The difference being that in those other countries it's usually a rail network, and here in America we prioritized air travel, which is much more costly to our wallets and the environment. Education is also socialized here in America, at least up through high school. Most other countries offer some sort of free education all the way up through university. So many politicians here in America have been discussing making college free, or at least forgiving some sort of jail, or at least forgiving student debt in order to combat the student debt crisis. Almost every country has a minimum wage, but what about a maximum? Switzerland actually just passed a maximum wage, and other countries are starting to look at the idea as well. This is often associated with what's called a brain drain. The idea is that if there's a cap on how much people are allowed to earn, the smartest people are going to leave. This actually happened in Egypt when they passed their similar law. In Japan, they have a similar idea called the progressive wage. Basically what this means is that the highest earner at a company can only make so much more than the lowest earner. Since we're talking about wages, let's talk about that basic income idea. This is when a country just cuts its citizens a flat rate check. A lot of countries do this, and Finland just started their program. A lot of Americans will scoff at the idea, but we actually do it here. We just call it a lot of different things. On the small scale in Alaska, it's called the Alaska Permanent Fund. Just by living there, you get a small annual check. It comes from the oil profits and it's managed by the state. On the national scale, we call it Social Security. Everyone pays into it, and if you live long enough, you get to draw from it. It's under no threat of falling apart, but this is only for the very old. Basic income would go a bit further though, and has been supported by a wide range of politicians. It would be a flat rate check for every single American, and be enough for you to live on if you chose to do so. Some people say that this would be a validation of stay-at-home parents' work, or this could just supplement your income if you chose to continue working. Basically, it's Social Security for everybody, and more importantly, it would replace all forms of welfare. No more unemployment or food stamps, and by most estimates, it would do it far more cheaply. Unemployment, public housing, food stamps, EBT, WIC, all forms of welfare that you can think of could be replaced by basic income. All of those current forms of welfare are actually socialism. We'd just be bundling them all together and calling them one thing, and eliminating several overlapping bureaucracies. But that's really what socialism is. Government control over the distribution of goods and services in order to make sure that it's more equitable and cost-effective for everybody. And it works in most countries. Most of the fear of socialism here in America has to do with taxes, which I personally find a little bit strange, since back in the Red Scare, America had some of the highest taxes in the world. They've slowly been cut over the last half century, but mostly for the very rich. In 1950, earnings over $200,000 were taxed at 91%. Earnings under $2,000 were taxed at 20%. There was no difference for being married or anything. In 2015, earnings over $413,200 were taxed at 39.6%, and earnings under $9,225 were taxed at 10%. Once they've been lowered like this, it's incredibly hard to ever raise them again. I did a video on America's progressive tax system a few weeks ago that covers the math and the candidates' proposed systems a little more in depth. With Americans paying so little in income tax, we end up paying for those things that those highly taxed Europeans get from their government out of our own pockets. The biggest example is by far the thing that you've all been waiting for me to talk about, healthcare. Why do you guys hate me so much? Alright, no more fun here for a minute. We actually have socialized medicine here in America, for old people through Medicare, poor people through Medicaid, and military and veterans healthcare. What we don't have is universal healthcare. So if you're an ordinary citizen who doesn't fall into any of these categories, you still pay for them through Medicare, Medicaid, and other taxes, and in return you get no healthcare. Even if you have private insurance, you're still paying for that out of your own pocket, in addition to co-pays and other bills. Let's set aside the subjective quality of doctors and hospitals for a moment and talk about something objective, say a name brand pill. Americans pay more for the same pill than a European does, because the company is selling directly to the person, rather than to the government in the Europeans' case. While we're on the subject, let me dispel one more myth. Obamacare is not socialized medicine. You don't sign up for Obamacare, there is no Obamacare card. You sign up for regular private insurance and have a Blue Cross or Aetna card. All the Affordable Care Act did was require Americans to purchase health insurance and require those insurance companies to offer it to people who were previously denied. It also offered a federal expansion of Medicaid, but Medicaid is a state-run program, so states were free to accept or decline it, which just means that they're paying for it themselves if they didn't take it. So hopefully some of the propaganda and myths around these words and programs have been cleared up and you're able to look at them through a more objective lens. And the next time a politician proudly proclaims that they're a socialist and your grandpa automatically hates them, or you want to plan a vacation to the People's Republic of wherever, or someone says something smart like communism works in theory, you'll know better. Hey guys, if you learned something from this video, make sure to give that like button a click. If you'd like to see more from me, I put out new videos every weekend, so go ahead and give that subscribe button a vigorous pressing. I've never finished a game of Monopoly, and I swear I'm going to do it this time, so if you'd like to find out who wins, make sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I'm almost to 250 subscribers too, so make sure to share this with your friends, and leave any questions you might have about the channel or any of the past videos that I've made down in the comments below. But in the meantime, if you'd like to watch one of my older videos, how about this one?